Thank you very much, Marty. Good afternoon. I want you to continue eating too. It bothers me not at all if you do that. In fact, that way I won't feel I'm the only thing standing between you and lunch. So please proceed. Thank you, Marty, for that very kind introduction. While I am not receiving a Cronkite Award here today, I nevertheless feel hugely honored, really, to be a part of this prestigious gathering. And thank you, Dean Cowan, for having us here at the Annenberg School. Both you and Marty and this great school have provided such visionary and such amazing leadership in the crusade to improve broadcast journalism. It's an honor to be in the company of the distinguished broadcast journalists who are going to be recognized following our lunch today. Their presence testifies not only to their individual achievements, which are considerable, but to what broadcasting is capable of, even amidst the many challenges that confront our country's media. So I'm proud to share the platform with them. But there's one more source for the honor and the pride that I feel in being here, and that's because of the name that this award bears, Walter Cronkite. There could be no better title for these awards that celebrate and honor the work of today's best broadcast journalists. Walter Cronkite brings such credibility, adds such stature to this gathering. You know, one of my stellar experiences, really, since going to the FCC in 2001 has been getting to know Walter Cronkite and to be able now to count him as a friend and to have the opportunity to work every day at the Commission for the kind of public interest ideals that his career personifies over so many event-filled years, even decades. There are many reasons why Walter Cronkite became the most trusted person in America. Not the least of these is his ongoing trust in the American people and his lifelong commitment to making sure that the media where he works reflects the interests, reflects the diversity, reflects the dreams of his fellow citizens. He lives his ideals, and there is no one really in our national life that I admire more than this good man. Many of you have spent the morning, I understand, talking about the state of America's media. You are part of a budding national dialogue on issues that every citizen in our democracy needs to contemplate. So even as we celebrate the enormous accomplishments of our Cronkite Award winners today, we're beginning to understand how much more difficult it is to achieve those heights in today's new media environment, how much harder it is for broadcast journalism to flourish in the way that today's honorees really embody. We live in an age where television stations, as well as newspapers, and radio stations, and just about every other form of media that you can think of, are increasingly owned by large corporations, many located hundreds, sometimes even thousands of miles away from the communities that they are serving. We live in an age when job and budget cuts in the broadcast news industry seem routine. And I don't mean Don Imus here, or even astonishing announcements such as 700 jobs and $750 million in budget being cut from a major network operation. Just as important is the slow trickle of cuts, death by 1,000 cuts in so many of our local newsrooms. And these cuts inflict harm on the industry, harm on the communities, and harm, I believe it's lasting harm, on our country. You don't need to take my word for it. Listen to what Walter Cronkite himself recently said at a forum on media ownership and the public interest. And incidentally, this was another example of his heroism because he was having some problems with his eyes and left the school immediately to go have eye surgery. It was really above and beyond the call of duty for him to come and give this speech. And he said, quote, "From my perspective, the major problem with journalism these days is not with individual journalists or the standards of the profession. The young people I see entering the field of journalism today are no less intelligent or dedicated than in my generation. They are indeed quite brave to be entering a profession with far less job security and far greater economic uncertainty than the one I knew. They do so, I believe, out of a deep sense of commitment to public service. No, the major problem I see today has to do with unrealistic expectations that consolidated corporate ownership puts on working journalists." end quote. And he went on to point out that his generation of journalists knew they would have to work hard. After all, their job was to uncover truths that politicians and special interests didn't want uncovered. But at least they expected that they would always have the resources to do their job. And now, however, Walter pointed out, they no longer have that expectation. Now, sad that is, and this is how he put it. He said, "Today, I do not believe most journalists have the luxury of having enough resources. Instead, they are saddled with inflated profit expectations from Wall Street. They face round after round of job cuts and cost cuts that require them to do ever more with ever less. In this information age and the very complicated world in which we live, the need for high-quality reporting is greater than ever. It's not just the journalists' jobs at risk here. It's American democracy. It's freedom's future," end quote. Now, I don't want to sound all doom and gloom, because certainly Walter Cronkite didn't sound that way. He ended his speech saying, "America is a powerful and prosperous nation we certainly should insist upon and can afford to sustain, a media system of which we can be proud," end quote. And I think that's just the right way to put it. Thankfully, we are a rich and powerful nation, and we certainly can afford to sustain a great media system, even at a time of great technological ferment and complexity. The question is how we manage this transition and ensure that American voters and citizens continue to get the high-quality news that they need and that they deserve to have. I think each of us has a role to play. For openers, the FCC needs to back off any further loosening of the few media ownership protections that have survived. This is not the time for more duopolies or triopolies or sweetheart newspaper broadcast cross-ownership deals that strangle localism, strangle diversity, and strangle competition. But it shouldn't be all about playing defense either. Why can't the FCC go on the offense for a change? Once upon a time, there were FCCs that did that. Here's one idea. Let's make FCC license renewal into more than a paper tiger. That means that every time a media company comes in to renew a license, it should have to prove that it is serving the public interest. No more postcard license renewals. Let's actually require a station to show that it is providing public affairs programming, genuine children's educational shows, political campaign coverage, and so on before we renew the license. And let's also make sure all of this information is up on the web so citizens around the country can see how their airwaves are being used. I think it'd be a wonderful stimulus to public awareness and to public action. And let's do license renewal every 3 years like we used to do it, rather than send in the postcard once every 8 years like we do it today. It is also past time for the FCC to get serious about the public interest in the digital age. You know, digital TV means a single station can offer up to 6 individual channels of programming. That's a lot of power, a lot of influence. Do we really need to fill up all that capacity with more of this nationalized, homogenized corporate programming? Why can't we make sure that some significant part of this additional capacity is dedicated to local programming, independent programming? So many independent producers, actors, directors in this community who have lost out. Here's a wonderful opportunity for reflecting their creative talent and their genius. So why can't we make sure that a substantial part is dedicated to programming produced by minorities? Right now, minorities, as you all know, make up almost a third of the population of our great country. They own about 3% of full-power commercial television stations, maybe 2% of the broadcast assets. And then we wonder, why do they always appear in caricature and stereotype on the TV screens? Why aren't their issues covered? Why don't they even hear the kind of advertising that would be directed at their various communities? We need to do better. Our media have an obligation to reflect America's diversity. Our media have an obligation to nourish America's great diversity. and I told this to the National Association of Broadcasters the day before yesterday in Las Vegas, it is a job that is not getting done, and it's only going to get done if we put some extraordinary effort and some extraordinary passion and some extraordinary commitment into it. Not business as usual, not going to solve this problem. And of course we need academics and professionals like Marty and Jeff and many of you in this room to keep up all of your good work. Information is to a large extent a coin of the realm in Washington. Good research like the Lear Center's fantastic work documenting the lack of political coverage on the evening news that takes the debate out of the realm of anecdote and into the realm of substantive social science and gives us the data, the corpus of information that we need to make intelligent decisions for the future. The facts are on our side. We shouldn't be bashful about getting them out. And I'm also talking about events just like this one that you all are attending today, where working journalists and students and teachers get together to think about how regulatory and economic issues affect your ability to do good journalism. I know that many journalists generally try to stay out of the political arena, and I certainly applaud that impulse in most cases. But you know what? If anybody is going to tell this story of how journalism is being affected by media consolidation and these other forces, it's going to have to be the journalists themselves. Who better to tell it? You have the knowledge, you have the experience, and you have the pulpit. And this is a tremendously important story, and our democracy is suffering because that story so often goes untold. Finally, and most important, each of us as a citizen needs to engage in this struggle. You know, even if the future of our media is not your number one issue, I submit that it needs to be your number two issue. And goodness knows, America's got all kinds of transcendently important issues, issues of peace and war, how we find jobs for our people, how we provide health insurance to the uninsured, how we educate our kids, how we provide security to our society. A lot of big issues out there. If you don't like the way that the media is handling the issues of most concern to you, then you need to do something about it. If you're happy, you think all these issues are being handled just fine, you know, you don't need to listen to me anymore. But if you think maybe those issues would benefit from a little more diversity, a little more community input, a little more competition, then I think you really need to pay attention to this debate and engage in this debate. You need to tell your friends and your coworkers and your family and everyone you know about it. It's going to be only a grassroots movement will solve this problem in the final analysis. And we've seen that grassroots movement work in defeating the media ownership rules that Michael Powell propounded a few years ago. That was a success story. Activism can still work in this society, but now we're starting all over with our media ownership. So get involved, talk about it, write about it. If you've got a good voice, sing about it. Employ whatever talents and skills you have to tell this story. But above all, do something. Get involved, be activists in this great cause, and take heart from the work of our Cronkite Award winners here today, and be inspired by the living example of Walter Cronkite himself, and know that through your efforts we can achieve, and I really do believe this, we can achieve in the years just ahead a media that is truly reflective of the needs and the genius of this great land. Thank you very much.